Hi. So in music, rhythm is the primary thing. Rhythm comes first. So whatever it is you're doing, whether you're playing a piece that you've learned, or you're improvising, or you're playing by ear, or maybe you're sight reading, rhythm is the most important thing. You must put it before everything else. That means put it before things like technique, which, is a secondary thing, very much lower down in the list of priorities, before anything to do with execution. And it's even true for people who might be composing, because rhythm is structure. Rhythm is the structure of the music. Rhythm is how music unfolds and makes sense. So, rhythm comes first for me as a fluent musician, absolutely every time. And mastering rhythm as the priority and becoming very fluid and free and clear in the way that we sort of perceive and have rhythm flow directly out of our body into the keys. To me, this is, or whatever instrument we play for that matter, voice, playing violin, whatever, getting that rhythm to flow from us in a way that is completely natural and easy, but with absolute structural clarity in the mind. That is the absolute number one priority. And I say that with complete authority because it's what I do for myself. So I know not everybody is like this. I know there are a lot of musicians out there who seem to manage to play quite well without having this kind of emphasis on rhythm that I make. But for me and for my students, I make sure that this is to be considered the number one priority. So I recommend that wholeheartedly. Good rhythm kind of is the basis of good music, in my view. So if rhythm is so important, and it is, it's kind of the thing that makes music make sense. That's the way I see it. It's the underlying syntax of the music. Before we do anything tonal and make melodies and chords, the rhythm is the thing that gives music sense and gives it a feeling of moving forwards and meaning something. The danger is giving it so much priority, you might start to want to really control it. And this is the second thing that I want to really hammer home strongly to people, is you don't want to try and control your timing. So rhythm is not timing. Rhythm is structure. It's we'll go into it a little bit more in this video. I've got another video called What is Groove, because the groove is the most important part of rhythm. Perhaps it's the foundation of all music, really, if you think about it. Music needs to be organized in something. So before we have any sound, you have the meter, the groove. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So the danger is that we try and control the timing as if rhythm is something that is very precise. Some people might use metronomes, the tendency to use a metronome to try and control the output, to make it absolutely strict, absolutely perfect. This is a real danger. And you get this sort of effect, don't you, where the control of the rhythm makes it actually less in time. And it all feels out of control. If I allow myself to just sort of feel the rhythm in a more natural way, the timing is actually more flexible. This is the point. So making sure that rhythm is, like from a critical point of view, from a listening point of view, is perfect, or sort of mechanically, like you're like a human machine, and this perfect rhythm is coming out of you. This is very, very dangerous and can cause terrible problems with tension and what seem like technical problems, but they're really just rhythmic problems. So a mental problem that you're trying to control the rhythm too much, control the timing, making the error of thinking that rhythm is purely timing. Obviously, rhythm happens in time, but it's not just about timing. So that's my second very important tip to help us get away from rhythmic problems, to help us really solve rhythmic problems. Don't make timing the outcome, the end result. Don't make timing the thing that you're controlling. So the other thing that happens with people, and they often think they're very good at rhythm. So those people may not be watching this video because they think they're really good at rhythm. But hopefully some of these people find out that their rhythm isn't quite as good as they think it is, and they start to investigate how to improve their rhythm and work on rhythm. Because I work on rhythm all the time. It's the most important thing, as I said. So what do these people do? They kind of just think their rhythm's okay because they do it how it goes. They have a sense of what sounds good. So I make up a rhythm. I go da 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 da, and they think that's kind of okay. I suppose it's not horrible. It's not like awful. If you've got a bit of natural musical flair, it doesn't sound too bad. But there's no kind of awareness of the structure. The feeling in the body doesn't feel good. And then we run into problems. We start doing things with a kind of speech rhythm. So you get this kind of effect. So there's a kind of lumpiness and there is a kind of unsteadiness. It's very delivered. It's almost like a speech rhythm. It's quite clear what it is I'm saying. So it's not unmusical, but it just doesn't have a feeling of rhythmic stability and unfolding and groove, which would be something more like this. So this is the thing about rhythm, not just being simply how we hear it, how it goes. We'll make terrible mistakes often with more complex rhythms. These kind of rhythms where you have lots of little note values and then long notes, stuff like this. Difficult to kind of just copy that rhythm. So you need that kind of inner understanding, that feeling. It's strange because from a listening perspective, you don't hear that and not care whether it's good rhythm or not. So the fact that we don't necessarily know when we're actively doing music doesn't mean it doesn't matter, because as a listener, we hear the difference between good rhythm and bad rhythm. This time I'm not going to bother. I'm going to play something similar because I was just improvising then. So I'll improvise something kind of similar with long spaces and fast notes, but I won't bother with the groove and the rhythm. I'll just kind of make it up like a kind of speech rhythm. It doesn't feel the same. It doesn't have that same sense of sense, that same sense of making sense, of it being something that we actually understand. So don't just rely on kind of knowing how it goes, kind of karaoke sense, or that it sounds something like what musical rhythm sounds like. You have to understand rhythmic structure. So before we get into this structural thing, I've got, as I said before, I think I mentioned it before, I've got another video called What is Groove, which goes into some of the detail, perhaps a bit more than this video, but I will talk in a minute a bit more about what rhythmic structure is and how it works in a fairly kind of sketchy, superficial way, really. If you want to really study it, it's a deep subject. There's a lot to do here, but we'll get into that in a minute. The thing about rhythm is we kind of have to feel it inside. We feel it internally. We feel it in our body. We feel it in our soul. So we feel it in our body as kind of like a wave or this kind of jaunty feeling. There's some sort of feeling of flow and wave in the body, a bit like how water has a rhythmic movement. So if you're on a boat, you're experiencing some kind of rhythmic movement. We walk in rhythm, we breathe in rhythm, we even speak in rhythm to some degree, although speech rhythms are very complex and quick and we're very unaware of them. So that's interesting. So that feeling in the body of rhythm and flow, we've got to make sure it's there. And the feeling in the soul, which is, it has a poetic feeling, a feeling of telling something beautiful, telling something that makes sense. So all kinds of rhythm. I'm sort of, generalizing completely. I'm not talking about specific genres or specific, kinds of music. There is some very romantic music that has very stretchy groove and is very romantic. Because of that kind of enhances that feeling of romanticism. Slower kind of stretchy music, and then you get very kind of much more strict music, which I think as a human being you should never still try and play metronomically. It doesn't matter if you don't hit all the time spots, as my old teacher used to say. He used to put the metronome on, having go tick 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 tick, hitting every single note exactly on the time spot, which I think is just silly. It makes playing unrhythmic. So, and it's not about feeling then, as I was saying before, we don't make the outcome like about timing. So we feel the rhythm, we feel it naturally in our body and soul, and it makes a huge difference. It's almost as if, there's a feeling of this thread that runs through this kind of flowing, stretchy energy. So even the slowest piece of music, like this Chopin, the opening of this Chopin C minor nocturne, which I love to play really slowly and feel that stretch. You feel this in the body. If you don't feel it, it will just kind of sag. Feel that kind of wave pulling through. And if you bother to do that as a musician, if you find that within you, and when you play and it's really flowing naturally from the body and soul, not coming from the head too much. The head's involved, but it doesn't generate it. You don't executively, with your executive controlling mind, control a rhythm. As I said before, you allow that flow from the body. You understand the structure, but you allow that flow from the body, from the soul. So you tell it, you feel it. So my fifth point is kind of getting into the nitty-gritty a bit. It's all about the poetic meter. You've got to feel the poetic meter and try and understand it as well. So, in music, the common time is it's very common and it's very simple as a structure. It's basically one beat or beat group or cell, as I like to call it, followed by another cell. Followed by, not just followed by, is it? It's like answered by, completed by. People talk about call and response, but it doesn't have to be call and response. It can be call, response, call. Now you notice there it's like those two became a unit, the first two became a unit, and they're answered by the next two. And this is kind of how poetic meter works as well. So how lines of poetry are organized into, say, 4 lines. Very traditional rhyming poetry, not kind of more modern stuff, but the more and childlike poetry as well. So like almost like a nursery rhyme sort of structure is how the groove tends to work in music. Very commonly, you do get very complex grooves and meters in music, and they work on the principle of cells in groups of 2s and 3s to make all the different numbers that are possible, all the different groupings. So I could do something like this. I could do da, dee, da, dee, da. Da, da, dee, da, dee, da, da. So if you followed the numbers there, you can always rewind and have another look. The numbers are 2s and 3s, and they're organized into bigger 2s or 3s. And this is how meter works in music. It's common time is just 2s and 2s and 2s growing, and it's like cell division. It just gets bigger and bigger, this structure. And we feel it, like I was saying in the last point, we feel that in the body and soul as well. It's a structure that we can know with our minds, but we feel it with the body and soul. And this is why it's so useful for all kinds of music, whether it's playing music or composing music, any aspects of doing music, having a sense of this underlining sense. It gives you sense, as I keep saying, this sense of structure, this sense of rhythmic structure in your mind, and then you feel it unfold with the body and soul, and you get great results almost without having to try. That's the thing. There is something difficult involved in doing this, and we'll get into that in a minute, but this is the point I'm making, is that poetic meter, musical meter, there is a structure, there is some mathematics. I teach in this kind of nested, not slightly non-linear way, rather than counting. I think counting to, 7, what does 7 even mean? If you have a 7 time, it could be 2, followed by 3, followed by 2, da, da, dee, da, da, dee, da. Or it could be 4, like two twos followed by three. Da da dee da dee da da. That's a different seven. So we need these numbers of twos and threes, and four is okay as long as we know that it's two times two, two plus two. So there is this simple mathematical structural element to rhythm that is very, very useful to know. And then it's like a poem. You feel it like a poem. You kind of say it like a poem. So if I played that Bach, I think I played at the beginning again, see if you can have that sense of the matrix running. I'll play a different Bach. I'll play the famous C major one. So here we go. So I'm hoping some of you might have noticed that there is a three at the end rather than a four. It's a kind of shorter phrase. Or if I play something that's got a more complex rhythm, can you still feel the groove underneath it? So even things that have very sort of intricate rhythms like that, it's still got this poetry underneath it. Music's a bit like rapping. When you hear a really good rapper, they can get the rhythms of the words to fit into the cells of the groove. So good rapping, of course, is all about groove. I think all music is all about groove. It's all about making these cells or packets within this rhythmic structure that we build. It's making them fuse together in a very special way, in that rhythmic way, that sort of way. Kind of like the call and response thing that does get taught in sort of practical musicianship, but not quite as kind of simple as just call and response. It's poetry. It's unfolding. It's like telling a story. It always feels like once upon a time, and that's really the basis of how rhythm works. Getting that clear in your mind, that poetic thing that is meter, the matrix, the groove. Okay, so the last 2 points. The first one is point 6 key, the sixth key to good rhythm is, this is kind of the big one in a way, You have to be brave. You have to let go. You have to relax. You have to allow your body and your mind to be relaxed and clear and open. So all the other things I've been saying, especially the earlier points, like the first one, not controlling the result, this is all really so that we get this feeling of freedom. When we play rhythmically and we're relaxed, we can play with tremendous strength and ease and fluidity. We can play fast, we can play loud, but obviously we can also play really quietly. The body loves rhythm. The body finds rhythm really helpful to its functioning. It works better rhythmically. So yeah, when you're tight, obviously the body doesn't work. So people often end up working a lot on technique and fingering and finger positions and arm positions and wrist positions and drilling technical stuff to try and work through this tension that's causing their technical problems, when really they should be just working on their rhythm. Because rhythm, when it's in the body, as it should always be, makes the body work really well. But it's hard because the ego. Now, what do I mean by the ego? People talk a lot about ego, don't they? To me, the ego is the part of us that wants to get comfort, satisfaction, approval, particularly. It wants to make sure that we get things right, do things well. Obviously, it's quite insecure very often, the ego. Underneath its veneer of striving, maybe even confidence, there can be this fundamental insecurity. So the ego needs to be calm down, and that's why I like to teach people to understand the structure of rhythm, because then the mind's got something really cool to kind of focus on. Apart from it just being very useful from a musical perspective, it gives the mind something to focus on, so that then we can relax. We cannot come from our mind, because the ego absolutely hates the feeling of groove, because the ego is all about control. It's about getting that control, getting outcomes, making sure that we don't embarrass ourselves, we don't look stupid. So, especially because it's such a childlike kind of feeling that we get when we really tune into rhythm. It's so expressive, it feels so good. The ego can really block us. It can really get in the way, really badly for many, many people. So this it's essential to really work on that, to work on getting your mind to get out of the way so that you can actively relax. I would even go as far as say kind of aggressively relaxed. Really relax your body, really relax your mind. We've all got a sense of rhythm. If we didn't have a sense of rhythm, we wouldn't function. Even worms have a sense of rhythm, as I like to say. It's just a normal, natural thing. So this business of relaxing sounds like a little thing. Oh, just relax, and then you play rhythmically well. It's a huge thing to relax your mind and your body. Very, very important. If I improvise something like this again, I've improvised this kind of rhythmic style a few times. So here we go again. When we have that kind of long notes and short notes and sort of complicated note values, people often get very sort of worked up when they're sort of trying to read this sort of thing, or work out how to play it correctly, how it goes. They start thinking about note values and fractions and all this sort of thing. That just causes kind of brain freeze for us in the moment. It causes lots of tension as well in the mind and then in the body. So if it's not about note values and not about timing each note, which I'm trying very clearly to say it isn't, it's about obviously feeling these packets, these cells of time in the groove, and then filling them with what I would call rhythm cells, things that make sense. So if I go dum, diddle little diddle dum, dum diddle diddle dum dum. Did you feel that I had a groove and I was saying these cells very, very naturally? I wasn't trying to make them perfect again. I'm making that point. If I go diddle little dum, I don't have to make my diddle little into I don't have to make it into something perfect or metronomic. I just go diddle little dum, and that will be more rhythmic, I would say, because rhythm requires this element of lilt or slightly bendy curviness. More rhythmic, so it would sound better. Plus, I can actually do it with my body and stay relaxed. So we don't think in note values, think in rhythm cells. There are actually only 12 rhythm cells, in total. Even you can combine them in all sorts of ways to make all kinds of complexity, like endless complexity. It seems infinite. It seems. I guess it can't be, but it seems like it. What with all the flexibility you can do and syncopation, tying, putting things together in certain ways. So a rhythm like da 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 diddle diddle da da dum da 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 is still made of those 12 rhythm cells. Each packet of the groove that I was feeling on each cell was, filled by one of those 12 rhythm cells. So I teach all this. If you're interested in musicianship, this kind of fluent practical musicianship, you can take a look at my website, playpianofluently.com. Where I have some materials available. I believe practice is best if it's self-directed, so I don't really call it a course, although I do organise things into steps, 15 steps to fluency. So have a look at that if you want, because we can go very deep into this if you want to. But just that feeling of moving away from timing note values, feeling the groove as these kind of as I say, kind of packets of time and just playing within them naturally. You could even do that with better with a drum beat, I think, than a metronome. Metronomes are a little bit clicks are a little bit evil as a practice tool. I think going for something that's got a bit more feel, like a drum beat of some kind, is better. So you can even do that fine flexibility within each beat, as it were, with each packet of time. So don't think in fractions and note values. It'll get you really all tied up in your brain and tightened up in your body. So that's it. Those are my 7 keys to playing with good rhythm. It's kind of a real overview. It's quite doesn't go that deep, obviously, what I'm saying here, but I think it gives some initial insight into how to practice and study rhythm and why it's so important.